yesterday I started talking about dissociation disorders. Now, I am going to say again, this is a very controversial subject, very sensitive subject, and for those that find things like this very triggering, please be aware, please be informed that this is what I'm going to be talking about. So yesterday we talked about how there were three dissociation disorders. There are more than three dissociation disorders, but there are three main types. I talked yesterday about dissociative amnesia. Please ignore the washing machine, I overloaded it this morning. And we talked about how it leads to things like memory loss, forgetfulness of persona, and feelings of confusion, finding yourself in places where you either were meant to go to, so travelling somewhere on purpose, or wandering around in confused states. Things like that, periods of absolute memory loss where you can't remember like normal information, you can't remember events, you forget information like things you've learned, talent, skills. That's the kind of things I did talk about yesterday, but it is also important to note that dissociation disorders can work in conjunction with other medical conditions. Mine works with my neurological disorder. They kind of work hand in hand. So if I start getting so completely stressed, my FND is out of control, my functional neurological disorder will get completely out of control. I'll start having seizures, and that will trigger a dissociative state. It's really hard to kind of stop that. It's very taxing on my brain to kind of stop that from happening. That kind of is how mine triggers. There are other triggers for mine, but that is one of my biggest triggers. I do have, a lot of other ones, but stress is my biggest trigger. And it works with my neurological disorder. It's not very nice. So today I'm going to kind of keep going with that. So we're going to talk about things like, now, this is the one that you hear a lot about on the telly, where you look for depersonalization and derealization disorders, where people end up living different lives, pretty much. These are the ones that you can end up kind of going in and out of for years. But these are the ones they tend to talk about a lot more. They call it a dissociative amnesia on the telly, but this is kind of the ones that they're talking about. It's because this is the one that kind of goes on. It doesn't stop. It has, the depersonalization is where you literally are feelings of being outside of your own body. You can observe yourself, observe your feelings when you're in a dissociative state. Now, this is not the same as being in a dissociative amnesia. When that happens, you disappear. You black out, you disappear, and it's only when you're coming back out of the dissociative state that you begin to re-emerge. That is a weird feeling, because that's when you're outside of yourself. That's when you're in a dissociative amnesia state, when that triggers, when that happens, you black out. You disappear completely. You're not there. You're physically there, but you're not. You tend to disappear. When you come out of it, when it ends, you begin to sort of come back. And that's when you start feeling like you're not real, like you're not really there. It's like you do feel like you're not real, like some people will feel like they're not in their body anymore, like it's not real. I personally feel like I'm waking up from some kind of amnesia, kind of, if you've ever had hospital kind of put you to sleep, completely put you to sleep, with amnesia, with like their drugs and stuff, whatever they're called, I can't even remember what they're called. What's the drug called? I can't remember it. Put you to sleep for an operation, knock you right out, and then as you come round, you get this feeling that you're kind of floating above yourself for a few minutes. That's kind of how I feel, and then you kind of slowly begin to come back to earth. And then as your vision kind of starts to clear, because everything's really foggy, the whole world is really kind of foggy for a little while, until your vision kind of clears. And then the hearing comes back, because you've got no visual, no hearing, the whole world kind of isn't there for a little while. So as you're kind of feeling a little floaty, there's no visual, there's no hearing, you're just kind of there floating around. And as you come back to earth, and that's kind of how it feels like you're kind of coming back to earth a bit. And once you kind of feel like you're grounded, the vision clears, and then the hearing clears, and then you start feeling sick. But once you realise where you are, you kind of have to then regain your bearings. And it takes a bit longer for the memory of where you are and what you're doing and who you are to kind of come back. Because sometimes you could be in a situation where it's dangerous. There have been many times where that's happened to me, and you've had to kind of move. Like when I've been in the middle of the road with cars hurtling towards me and my son. That was scary. And you've kind of had to move really fast. And when you're sort of feeling very sure on your legs, and you've kind of had to kind of move at a really fast, that doesn't work very well. Yeah. But when you've got time to kind of gather your thoughts, you kind of stand there for about 10 minutes going, what the hell am I doing? Where am I and why am I doing it? That's how it feels. So depersonalization is worse than that, because it takes longer. Feelings of being outside yourself, I can imagine it's worse than that, because you're actually, during that dissociative state, you're actually watching yourself. Okay? Observing your feelings and actions and thoughts from a distance. Whereas I never did. Once I was in a dissociative state, I had no clue what was going on and what I was doing until after, when I had to kind of figure out where I was and what I was doing. For people who have depersonalization or derealization disorders, they actually get to watch it, feel it, observe it from a distance. So they kind of feel it from outside their body. It's almost like they're there, but not really there. That's a scary kind of thought. And these are the people that can kind of regain their memory back. It takes a while, but they're the ones that can, because the world around them still feels very kind of foggy, because they also have what's classed as derealization, which means the world is unreal, the world is foggy, and it's not really there. So they're watching themselves, but they don't know what's going on. They can't see it, they can't hear it, they can't feel the world around them. They're watching their own thoughts and actions. They don't actually understand them. And this is why a lot of people in the films and the movies and everything else go through extensive therapy to get their memories back and can regain some of their past lives. Because their lives during the time that they were missing, because I can imagine that with enough therapy, I don't know if it's really true because I don't suffer with this one. I can imagine that I'm no therapist, I'm no mental health specialist, but if it actually is real and it is true that with extensive psychotherapy they are capable of regaining that memory of that during that dissociative state, that's actually quite an incredible thing. But that is what they suggest during these films. But this is what they're reckoning. Okay, but this is the one that they're talking about. But they're referencing mine, which is really strange. But the depersonalization and derealization, it is one and the same. They watch it, they observe themselves, they feel themselves, they can hear themselves. It's like an outer body experience for them. But the whole of the rest of the world around them is gone. It's not there. So they don't have any of their five senses. There's nothing going on around them. It's just what they feel. Their actions, they can watch their hands, their feet move. They can see what they're doing, roughly, but it is all from a distance. There's nothing really there. It's like a real outer body experience. It's just this absolute feeling of, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Because they can't stop it. They can't change the action. But they're watching it happen to themselves without any real understanding of it, because they have no idea what's going on around them. You can have one or the other. So you can have depersonalization or derealization. Or you can have both together, and it is important that you don't have to have both of them. But it is important that if you have one, there is a possibility you have the other. But it does come and go over many, many years. It's harder to actually control. Is what they claim, that this one's harder to control. Just purely because of what it is. And how it works. I think it's because that they find that there's a lot more psychoanalysis that needs to be done on that particular form of dissociation. There's a lot in it. The other one was classed as multiple personality disorder. Now they changed the name to DID, dissociation identity disorder. Now they did this because people feel uncertain about their identity. Now when you dissociate, that's exactly what you're doing. They don't know who they are. The difference is they feel a presence of other identities. Now we've all heard of multiple personality disorder. I am going to look closer into this for next time, but there's a lot more into this that we need to go into. The one thing with this is that people will hear, they all have, anyone with DID or multiple personality disorder, is that they have, each identity has their own name, voice, personal history and mannerism. There is a lot about DID that I need to look into, and I will do that. But the main symptoms of it are memory gaps about everyday events and their own personal information. and having several distinct identities. And this is why they classed it as a dissociation identity disorder rather than just multiple personality disorder, because they have all these memory gaps and losses of personal information, as well as various other issues that actually associate it with a dissociation disorder. So I am going to do a whole thing on that once I finish this, because I am not done with this yet. There are other conditions that are associated with dissociation disorders, because like I said, a lot of the time people who have dissociation disorders can have other mental health issues or neurological disorders, and a lot of them have, so people could also have things like PTSD, depression, anxiety, panic attacks, eating disorders, and the list, it kind of goes on for quite a while. So, you know, and on top of it all, they also have things like sleeping issues, insomnia, things like that. Now, that list pretty much is me, to be fair. I mean, when they reeled off that list, I sat there and I went, yeah, that's me. There was a very few things on that list that didn't involve me. My neurological disorder, FND, it has things like depression and anxiety on it. It's part of the symptoms of it. I have it. I've had depression and anxiety since I was about 16. I was diagnosed with PTSD about 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. I've had an eating disorder since I was about 14, 15. And I've been having panic attacks since I was about 20. So yeah, I do really well, me. And I don't sleep very well. I haven't slept very well for a long time. In fact, I haven't slept very well for nearly 20 years. A lot of that is due to my son. I'm a very light sleeper, but I do have issues sleeping on the odd occasion. I take sleeping aids. My neurologist upped my sleeping tablets. I take amitriptyline. I take medium dose of amitriptyline every night. It's an antidepressant, anti-seizure, and sleeping tablet. I have to take it every night. I take 100 milligrams every night at the moment. That was upped about a year ago. Yeah. So I do well, me. And that's just one of the many tablets that I take. Yeah. Anyway, that they have done a lot of research into. They've done some research into it. Although they don't truly completely understand how it works and what causes it. But what they do know is that they found that previous traumatic experiences or have a tendency to develop more physical or psychological symptoms when stressed or distressed. That's what they found. So yeah. So what they really mean by that is that people with dissociative disorder could have experienced childhood abuse, either physical, sexual, or emotional. That is what they mean. It is one of those three. Okay, but they have said that some people will dissociate because they have war experience, so either they're from a war-torn country or they've served in the military and seen things, they've been kidnapped. That in itself would be traumatic enough to make the brain dissociate. Or they've even claimed that an invasive medical procedure could be enough to trigger the brain into switching off from reality, because it's actually a normal defense mechanism. I mean, all of those are ways and possibilities to make the brain switch off, because that's all a dissociative thing is. When people dissociate, it is what the brain is doing is switching off. It's protecting you. A dissociative state is the brain's way of protecting people from too much stress or trauma. It switches you off from reality because it can't handle it. That is what it's doing. And it's actually very normal. It is a normal defense mechanism. It helps, and it actually does help during a really traumatic event. It behaves in a sense of it's like an extreme form of denial. If it's switched off and it doesn't remember it, you've got complete denial. It doesn't happen. It's never happened. That never happened. I don't remember any of it. It never happened. It's a complete that didn't happen to me. That's exactly what your brain is doing. It's switched off. It's forgotten it. It's pretending it never happened. It's gone into denial mode. That is what your brain is doing. What is the problem is when that trauma is over, when you're out of it, when you're no longer in a situation when that trauma is happening, when you're out of, if you're in a home where you're experiencing trauma and you are then removed from that home and you're still having, and your brain is still switching itself off, and periodically disassociating, then it becomes a problem. So you're now in a safe environment, and yet, even though you're now safe, you've been removed from your kidnappers, you've gone through therapy, you're out of the abusive home, you're now in a safe home, you've gone through therapy, whatever, and yet your brain is still dissociating, it's still switching off. That is when you've got a problem. That is when it is no longer a defense mechanism and it becomes a disorder. You no longer have it as a defense mechanism. Your brain is now constantly going into it becomes a pattern of behavior, and your brain is now going, I'm not coping with anything anymore, I'm just going to keep going. And that's when you start losing your identity, you start losing pieces of yourself, you start losing everything, because your brain then starts to remove bits of information. Slowly but surely, every time you disassociate, you lose something else. You can regain some of it back. Over time, some of it will come back. Sometimes what happens is weird things come back, or pieces of information comes back, and it will never be a complete memory. It will be a piece of information. There'll be no feeling attached to it. There'll be no kind of, oh, I had to really do this, did that, and did that. And you won't sit there and go, oh, I remember this. It'll be, oh yeah, well, we did that, and I did that, and I did that. But it won't, it'll be information in your head. Whereas a lot of people remember their childhood, remember their teenage years, remember their schooling, remember this. People who had dissociative disorders, if it comes back, it will come back as information, not as a memory. So the faces and the people and the names and the places and the buildings and the everything else will be gone. The feelings and the emotions attached to it, they'll be gone. You will have a piece of information in your head going, oh yeah, well I did that and I did that. I couldn't tell you when I did it, but I did that and I did that. I have a lot of information in my head. Couldn't tell you when it happened. I can tell you I did certain things, but I couldn't tell you when and how it happened and why it happened. No idea. I have information in my head. I have no real memory of any of it. I don't know how I felt about it all. I couldn't tell you anything about the experience. I can tell you I did something though. You know, so I can tell you that every once in a while we used to go to the woods as a family. I couldn't tell you where the woods were. I know we used to drive there. I think we took the dog. No idea. I think at one point, I don't know. I know that. No, I don't know that either. The woods were massive. I know they were on the side of a road. There was a gate, I think. I know there was a log at the entrance of it. That's it. That's what we did. And we used to drive, and every once in a while we used to drive around Woburn Safari Park. And at one point the monkeys jumped on our car and left footprints. Yeah. I couldn't tell you how old it was, because I've no idea. Couldn't tell you how old the girls were either. I don't even know if one of them was even born at that point. I couldn't tell you if my younger sister was born when that happened. I couldn't tell you how old the girls were. I couldn't tell you how old I was. I can't tell you how old any of them are half the time. I couldn't tell you when any of their birthdays were. I've forgotten. There are a lot of things I can't do. I can't remember any of their birthdays growing up, what we did for their birthdays growing up. I remember we used to leave. I remember we left the Christmas tree up for my younger sister because her birthday was just after Christmas. That's it. Other than that, I can't tell you anything. I don't remember. It's a literal I don't remember. I have no memory. It's weird to be able to say things like that. You know, I know we all went to Switzerland in the car, but I can't tell you how many of us went. I can't tell you if the younger one was born at that point, because I don't know. I don't know if 4 of us girls went, or if there were 5 girls that went. I couldn't tell you any of it. I can tell you that on a Saturday morning in Switzerland, in the centre of Switzerland, it was dead in their town centre. In the town centre, in the capital city of Switzerland, on a Saturday morning, there was hardly any people around. And the cows and the sheep had bells on them. I mean, to this day, I find that amusing. Purely because the cows and sheep had bells on them. Other than that, the fact that I can't even tell you whether my younger sister had been born and there were 5 of us girls that went, or 4 of us girls, is really sad. Because I don't know. I can't remember. And the weird thing is, I don't care. Because it doesn't bother me that I don't remember. I have no real feeling about it, real emotion about not remembering. Because I can't remember the holiday. I remember going to Switzerland. I remember the fact that it was quiet and the cows and the sheep had bells on them, which, to be fair, is amusing. And I'd like to go back there one day. But that is it. This is the sad thing about people who have dissociation disorder. There is, the more it happens, the longer it happens, the less control you have over it, the more you lose. And that is the danger of your brain constantly switching off. The more it happens first in defense, and then if it doesn't stop and it keeps switching off, it keeps disassociating, you lose more and more and more and more. I'm 40. I have no memories of anything. No real memories. No. It's not a nice way to live, because I could have done anything. I could have been anything. You know. And I don't care. I'm here. It doesn't bother me. I have a good life now. But can you imagine if you had a dissociation disorder like DID, where you have multiple personalities, or where you had derealization, where you actually watched yourself go through all this? You know, I just vanish. I just disappear. You know, it's weird. But what time is it? How much more have we got to do? Right, what I think I'm going to do is finish this, because I don't think I want much left to do. It's not really enough for another video. So, the only way to diagnose this is for doctors to rule out any and every other mental health and neurological disorder. They will refer you to a mental health specialist for a full assessment. That's not fun. They will have, whoever they refer to will have a good understanding of dissociative disorders, and they will include a physical examination, that will include looking for head injuries. They will look for substance abuse. They will question you about your thoughts, your feelings, behaviours and symptoms. It's not fun. My head scans, completely normal, by the way. You must be honest with whoever is doing the assessment, because dissociation is nothing to be ashamed of, and it's nothing to be embarrassed about either. There is nothing embarrassing about dissociation. There is nothing to be ashamed of about it, because quite frankly, if you're not 100% honest, you will never ever learn to control it, and you will never get the help and the support that you need to deal with it either. The treatments for this are talking therapies. It is counselling. It is that it helps you to learn to manage your periods of disconnect. That is all it does. Generally, as a rule, they do not prescribe medication, because medication does not help. It doesn't. There is no medication on the planet designed to help dissociation disorders or any kind of dissociative states at all. But if you have things like depression or anxiety or things like that, they can describe things like antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds and things like that, but only if you have that underlying condition. It's that simple. And again, there are those that have like suicidal tendencies. It is there, it is in them. But it comes with any other associated conditions. Those that have like the depressions, the anxieties, things like that. That's where people with suicidal tendencies will get that from. It's not because of the dissociation. Dissociation does not come with suicidal tendencies. It will come from underlying conditions like depression, anxiety, things like that. But if you have dissociation identity disorder, I don't know yet what the effect is that you have on it, but I will once I look into it. I will be doing a thing on it in a couple of weeks. I'm going to do a thorough kind of research into that and make sure I learn about it. There are things that people around you can do if you have these kind of thoughts and feelings, or you personally can do if you feel that way and you need to reach out. So you can call the Samaritans, you can call your local doctors for help, and if you live on the British Isles, England, Scotland, Wales, whatever, you can contact NHS 111. They will help you. So people around you, if they feel like you're in need of that kind of support at all, reach out to them. Or if you personally are suffering with things like that, then please reach out to them. They are always there to help. Dissociation disorder is a very strange one, and because it comes with underlying conditions, it's harder to, people I think find it harder to reach out because there is this feeling of disconnect. But because that disconnect is so personal, they don't always consider reaching out, especially if they haven't been diagnosed with a dissociation disorder, because they do tend to feel a little crazy. I did years thinking there was something actually certifiably wrong with me. Because I would lose so much time, find myself in places that I didn't know how I got there, And my neurologist kept telling me I was epileptic because I was having epileptic seizures and was not being put on medication because there was no evidence of epilepsy, and yet that's all they kept telling me because my underlying condition was getting in the way of my diagnosis. It's so difficult. Once I got my diagnosis of not only my underlying condition, but my diagnosis of dissociation, I no longer felt crazy. And I got the help that I needed, the right help that I needed, the right support. I went into counselling, not just CBT. I went into counselling. I learned how to recognise and deal with my dissociative state so that I could mentally try to stop them. It's not easy. It's so difficult, and the concept of having to stop myself from disassociating is so weird, and it's not easy because of some of my triggers. But they can leave me so mentally drained that I'm out of action for fucking weeks. I can't work, I can't think, I can't do fuck all for a good 2-3 weeks because of it. It's not easy. Not everybody is the same as me. Some people can deal with it and it's easy and it's fine and they're okay because they don't have the same underlying conditions that I have. But everybody with a dissociation disorder needs the same support. Anyway, I'm going to go. I'm going to leave to it. I've got some research to do. And I'll see you later.